2 was reviewing the final production report for a project worth nearly $18 million when my new department manager told me I was no longer needed. Not because I had made a mistake. Not because the project had failed. Not because anyone had complained about my work. I was being replaced because someone else's friend needed a management position. The problem was that they didn't understand what my job actually involved. The spreadsheets, schedules, reports, and presentations were only the visible part of the work. The real value was everything underneath: the relationships, the trust, the informal communication channels, and the knowledge accumulated over 22 years. And they were about to discover how difficult it is to replace experience with confidence. My name is Emily Carter. I was 47 years old and had spent most of my professional life working in industrial manufacturing. For the last 11 years, I had been Senior Operations Manager at North Valley Components, a company that supplied precision parts to automotive and aerospace manufacturers across the Midwest. It wasn't glamorous work. Nobody made movies about supply chain coordination. Nobody celebrated successful production scheduling on social media. But when thousands of parts had to move through multiple facilities, arrive on time, pass quality inspections, and satisfy demanding customers, people like me kept everything running. That Thursday morning had started normally. I arrived at the office before 7. The production floor was already active. Forklifts moved pallets between stations. Machines hummed steadily behind safety barriers. Engineers reviewed overnight quality reports. I carried my coffee through the operations department, greeting employees I had known for years. Some of them had started as entry-level technicians. Some had become supervisors. A few had become close friends. At 9:15 a.m., I held our weekly production planning meeting. Representatives from logistics, procurement, quality assurance, and manufacturing filled the conference room. We reviewed inventory forecasts, discussed supplier delays, adjusted delivery schedules, solved problems before they became emergencies. By noon, everything looked good. The quarter was on track to become our most profitable in 5 years. Customer satisfaction scores were the highest they had been since I joined the company. Employee turnover in operations was lower than the industry average. Most importantly, our largest customers trusted us. That trust wasn't built overnight. It came from years of answering phone calls at midnight, working weekends during supply shortages, finding solutions when everyone else was panicking. One of those customers was Horizon Aerospace. Their vice president of procurement, Linda Hayes, had worked with me for nearly a decade. 2 weeks earlier, during a meeting at their headquarters, she had said something I still remembered clearly. "Emily, whenever your name is attached to a project, I stop worrying." At the time I had smiled and thanked her. Now those words felt strangely important. At 3:40 p.m., an email appeared in my inbox. Subject: Immediate meeting request. Sender: Ryan Mitchell, our new Director of Strategic Transformation. Even his title sounded expensive. Ryan was 32 years old. He had joined the company 3 months earlier after serving as a consultant for a major management firm. According to the executive team, he represented the future. According to most employees, he represented PowerPoint presentations. He spoke constantly about innovation, digital transformation, organizational restructuring, agility, optimization, synergy. I had heard those words so many times that they had lost all meaning. The strange thing was that he rarely visited the production floor. He spent most of his time creating presentations about improving operations instead of observing actual operations. Still, I had tried to keep an open mind. Every company needed new ideas. Experience and innovation could work together. At least that was what I believed. Until I walked into his office. The room looked more like a technology startup than a manufacturing company. Large screens covered one wall. Motivational quotes decorated another. A sleek glass desk stood in the center. Ryan sat behind it, checking messages on his tablet. Beside him sat Chloe Bennett. Officially, she was a process innovation specialist. Unofficially, she was Ryan's closest friend. She had joined the company 6 weeks earlier. Before that, her experience consisted primarily of managing digital marketing campaigns for lifestyle brands. I once heard her ask a production supervisor what a quality audit was. That conversation had not inspired confidence. Emily, have a seat, Ryan said. I sat down. He folded his hands together. We've been evaluating the long-term direction of operations. Something about his tone immediately felt wrong. Okay. As part of our modernization strategy, we're restructuring leadership responsibilities. I remained silent. Years of corporate experience had taught me that bad news usually arrived wrapped in impressive vocabulary. Ryan continued. The company needs leaders who align with our future vision. I stared at him. What exactly does that mean? It means today will be your final day. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. The final day? Your position is being eliminated. Eliminated. Interesting choice of words. Not replaced. Not reassigned. Eliminated. Yet Chloe was sitting beside him holding a folder labeled Operations Transition Plan. I already knew what was happening. Who will manage operations? Ryan smiled. Chloe will oversee the transition. I looked directly at her. She avoided eye contact. The silence lasted several seconds. Then I asked the obvious question. How much experience does Chloe have managing manufacturing operations? Neither of them answered immediately. Finally, Ryan said, we're focusing on leadership potential rather than traditional experience. Leadership potential. I had heard many dangerous phrases during my career. That one belonged near the top of the list. For 22 years I had helped build systems that connected purchasing, production, logistics, quality assurance, and customer relations. I knew which suppliers could be trusted during shortages. I knew which customers required daily updates. I knew which production lines could absorb additional volume and which could not. I knew hundreds of employees by name. Apparently none of that mattered anymore. Ryan slid a folder across the desk. Human Resources has prepared a separation package. I opened it. 6 months of severance. Confidentiality agreements. Various legal documents. Everything had already been planned. The decision wasn't being discussed. It was being announced. I thought about my mortgage. I thought about my father, whose medical expenses had increased significantly during the previous year. I thought about my younger sister, who was still recovering financially after a difficult divorce. But mostly I thought about the projects currently running through operations. 7 major customers, dozens of suppliers, hundreds of employees, thousands of moving parts. And now someone with almost no manufacturing experience would be responsible for coordinating all of it. Ryan checked his tablet again. We'll need your office cleared by 5. 22 years. Reduced to 1 sentence. Clear your office by 5. I stood up. Neither of them offered a handshake. Neither thanked me for my work. Neither seemed particularly interested in what happened next. As I walked back through the operations department, I noticed people watching me. News traveled quickly. Employees who normally greeted me suddenly looked uncomfortable. Some nodded quietly. Others looked angry. A few looked worried. They had every reason to be worried. Because unlike Ryan and Chloe, they understood how much of the company depended on relationships rather than software. And relationships don't transfer automatically when someone updates an organizational chart. I packed my office in silence. Not because I was calm. Because I knew that if I started talking, I might say something I would regret. For 22 years I had built my professional reputation on staying composed during crises. A delayed shipment. A supplier bankruptcy. A failed quality inspection. A customer threatening to terminate a contract. Those situations required clear thinking, not emotional reactions. This situation was no different. By 4:45 p.m., most of my personal belongings were packed into 3 boxes. Family photos. Reference books. Notebooks filled with handwritten observations from years of production meetings. My favorite coffee mug. The one my team had given me after we completed a particularly difficult aerospace contract 5 years earlier. As I carried the final box toward the elevator, someone called my name. It was Mark Davidson, plant manager. We had worked together for nearly 15 years. He looked furious. What the hell are they doing? I glanced around. Several employees were nearby. Not here, I said quietly. He nodded. We stepped outside into the parking lot. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Finally Mark shook his head. They put Chloe in charge. It wasn't a question. I nodded. His expression somehow became even darker. She asked me yesterday if machine utilization and production capacity are the same thing. I laughed despite everything. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Maybe she's a fast learner. Mark looked at me. Neither of us believed that. When I got home that evening, I sat at my kitchen table for nearly an hour without moving. The house felt unusually quiet. My daughter Emma was away at college. My father was staying temporarily with my aunt while undergoing medical treatment. For the first time in decades, I had nowhere to be. No reports waiting. No conference calls. No production emergencies. Just silence. Eventually, I opened my laptop. Instead of focusing on what I had lost, I started listing what I still had. Experience. Relationships. Knowledge. Professional credibility. A network built over more than 2 decades. North Valley Components had terminated my employment. They had not erased my career. That distinction mattered. The following Monday, I updated my professional profile online. Nothing aggressive. Nothing emotional. Just factual information. Independent operations consultant. Manufacturing strategy and supply chain optimization. I wasn't launching a competing business. I was simply making myself visible. Then I waited. The first call arrived 3 days later. It came from Rachel Simmons, a logistics director I had worked with years earlier. Emily, are you available for consulting work? Maybe. What kind of work? She explained that her company was struggling with inventory forecasting. Nothing connected to North Valley. Nothing that violated any agreements. Just a legitimate business opportunity. I accepted. 2 days later, another call arrived. Then another. Then another. Within 2 weeks, I was busier than I expected. Not because I was advertising, because people talked. Professional reputations travel surprisingly fast, especially in manufacturing. Meanwhile, news from North Valley started reaching me through former colleagues. The first warning sign appeared during week 3. Mark called one evening. I shouldn't even be telling you this. Then don't. He ignored that. Chloe changed the production scheduling system. I closed my eyes. Why? She said it was too complicated. Of course she did. The existing system wasn't complicated. It was detailed. Because manufacturing is detailed. Every production line had different limitations, different staffing requirements, different maintenance schedules, different quality controls. You couldn't simply simplify reality because it looked cleaner on a presentation slide. What happened? I asked. Mark laughed bitterly. We missed 2 customer shipments. That got my attention. 2 missed shipments in 1 week was unusual. Very unusual. North Valley's reputation depended on reliability. Customers tolerated many things. Delays were not one of them. The second warning sign arrived shortly afterward. This time the call came from Lisa Turner, Director of Procurement, another colleague I trusted. We lost a supplier. Lost? They terminated our preferred pricing agreement. I sat up straighter. That was serious. Preferred pricing agreements weren't easy to obtain. They were built through years of cooperation, years of paying invoices on time, years of solving problems together, years of mutual trust. What happened? Lisa sighed. Chloe told them our historical relationship model was outdated. I stared at the wall. She said what? She wanted to renegotiate everything through automated vendor evaluation software. For several seconds I couldn't find words. The supplier in question had worked with North Valley for almost 18 years. Their CEO personally knew half the leadership team. Destroying that relationship to impress executives with new software was like burning down a house because you wanted better lighting. The problems continued. Week 4 brought quality issues. Week 5 brought staffing problems. Week 6 brought customer complaints. The pattern was becoming obvious. Ryan and Chloe believed systems created success. What they failed to understand was that successful systems were usually built by experienced people. Remove the people. Ignore their knowledge. Disrespect their relationships. Eventually the system stops working. One Thursday morning my phone rang while I was reviewing a consulting project. The caller ID showed a familiar name. Linda Hayes, Vice President of Procurement. Horizon Aerospace. One of North Valley's largest customers. I answered immediately. Linda. Emily, I need to ask you something. Her voice sounded unusually tense. What happened? There was a pause. Then she said the words I had been expecting for weeks. Do you know what's going on over there? I leaned back in my chair. The collapse had begun, and everyone could finally see it. Linda was silent for several seconds after asking her question. I knew exactly what she meant. In manufacturing, bad news travels differently than in most industries. Companies don't announce that they're struggling. Customers notice it. Suppliers notice it. Employees notice it. Deadlines start slipping. Responses become slower. Mistakes appear where there used to be consistency. Trust begins to erode. Why are you asking? I said carefully. Horizon received 3 different delivery schedules from 3 different people in the last 10 days. That was alarming. North Valley had always maintained a single communication chain for major accounts. Conflicting information created confusion. Confusion created risk. And risk created unhappy customers. Linda continued. Yesterday our engineering team requested clarification about a production modification. Nobody could give us a clear answer. I wasn't surprised. When experienced employees leave or stop being consulted, institutional knowledge disappears quickly. What are you planning to do? I asked. Our board is reviewing alternative suppliers. That sentence carried enormous weight. Horizon Aerospace represented millions of dollars in annual business. Losing them would create serious financial consequences. We talked for another 15 minutes. I was careful not to discuss confidential information, careful not to criticize anyone directly. But by the end of the conversation, I could tell Linda had already made up her mind. She wasn't calling for information. She was calling because she no longer trusted North Valley. After we hung up, I stared out the window. For years I had worked to strengthen relationships like that. Now I was watching them unravel. Not because of market conditions. Not because of economic pressure. Simply because leadership believed experience was optional. The following week, another former colleague contacted me. Then another. Then another. Some wanted career advice. Some wanted references. Some wanted to know if I had heard about new opportunities. The mood inside North Valley was deteriorating rapidly. Employee turnover began increasing. Supervisors were leaving. Senior engineers were updating their resumes. Several production specialists accepted positions elsewhere. People weren't abandoning the company because they disliked change. They were leaving because nobody listened anymore. One afternoon Mark called again. You're not going to believe this. Try me. They eliminated the weekly cross-functional planning meetings. For a moment I thought he was joking. The meetings had existed for years. Operations, procurement, quality, logistics, engineering. Everyone in the same room. Everyone solving problems together. It was one of the most important systems in the company. Why? Ryan said meetings reduce productivity. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. People who rarely deal with operational complexity often assume communication is inefficient. The reality is usually the opposite. Most disasters occur because people stop communicating. Over the next month, North Valley's problems became impossible to ignore. Customers began escalating complaints. Several contracts were placed under review. Production efficiency declined. Quality metrics worsened. The executive team tried to blame external factors. Supply chain disruptions. Market conditions. Economic uncertainty. But everyone inside the industry knew the truth. The company wasn't failing because of outside pressure. It was failing because leadership had disconnected itself from reality. Meanwhile, my consulting work continued growing. What started as a few small projects expanded into something much larger. Companies weren't hiring me because I was brilliant. They were hiring me because I understood their businesses. I listened. I paid attention. I respected the people actually doing the work. One morning, nearly 3 months after my termination, I received a call from Jennifer Cole, president of Summit Manufacturing Group, one of the most respected companies in the region. We had worked together years earlier during a complex supplier integration project. Emily, are you available for lunch? I smiled. Depends on the reason. We're expanding operations next year. That got my attention. And? We need someone to lead the expansion. I remained silent. Jennifer continued. Several people recommended you. Several. I knew exactly who those people were. Former clients. Former colleagues. Industry contacts. The relationships built over 22 years. The same relationships Ryan and Chloe had dismissed as old-fashioned. We met the following day. For nearly 2 hours we discussed operations, leadership, manufacturing strategy, employee development, and customer relationships. Real business conversations. Not buzzwords. Not presentation slides. Not theoretical frameworks. Actual operational challenges. By the end of lunch, Jennifer leaned forward. I'll be direct. I appreciated that. We want you to join us. What position? Vice President of Operations. For a moment I genuinely thought I had misheard her. Vice President. A role larger than anything I had previously held. A role with significantly greater responsibility. And significantly greater influence. You haven't even interviewed other candidates? Jennifer laughed. We have. That answer surprised me. She smiled. And every comparison made your qualifications look stronger. 2 weeks later I signed the contract. The salary exceeded my previous compensation. The benefits were better. The leadership team impressed me. Most importantly, the company culture valued competence. Not slogans. Not trends. Competence. On my first day, I walked through the facility and introduced myself to employees. Machine operators. Technicians. Warehouse workers. Engineers. Supervisors. I asked questions. Listened carefully. Took notes. The same approach that had worked throughout my career. People don't support leaders because of job titles. They support leaders who respect them. 3 months later, Summit Manufacturing announced its strongest quarterly performance in 7 years. Employee engagement improved. Customer satisfaction improved. Production efficiency improved. Nothing magical happened. We simply focused on fundamentals. Communication. Accountability. Relationships. Consistency. The things that actually matter. Then came the phone call that brought everything full circle. Mark again. Only this time he sounded almost shocked. North Valley's board just fired Ryan. I wasn't surprised. What about Chloe? She resigned last week. The silence that followed felt strangely peaceful. Not because I was celebrating. Because the outcome had become inevitable long ago. The board had finally realized that presentations don't run factories. People do. And once you lose the trust of experienced employees, customers, and partners, rebuilding that trust becomes incredibly difficult. I hung up and looked around my new office. Outside the glass walls, employees were collaborating. Projects were moving forward. Problems were being solved. The business was growing. For the first time in months, I felt grateful for what had happened. Losing my job had felt devastating. At the time, it seemed like the worst moment of my professional life. In reality, it had forced me towards something better. Something I never would have pursued otherwise. And the most important lesson wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about value. Real professional value doesn't come from a title. It doesn't come from an office. It doesn't come from a company logo on a business card. It comes from competence. From trust. From relationships built over years of showing up, solving problems, and helping people succeed. Those things can't be eliminated during a restructuring meeting. And they certainly can't be replaced by someone who doesn't understand why they matter. 8 months after I left North Valley Components, I stood in front of nearly 400 employees at Summit Manufacturing's annual leadership conference. The event was being held in a large convention center outside Indianapolis. Department managers, engineers, supervisors, project leaders, and executives filled the room. A giant screen behind me displayed the company's year-end results. Record revenue. Record customer retention. Record employee satisfaction. As the audience applauded, I couldn't help thinking about where I had been less than a year earlier. Standing in Ryan Mitchell's office. Listening to someone explain why experience was no longer important. Life changes quickly. Sometimes faster than we expect. After the presentation, several managers approached me with questions about expansion projects scheduled for the following year. One wanted advice on staffing plans. Another needed help coordinating a supplier transition. A third wanted recommendations for leadership development programs. Normal conversations. Real work. The kind of work I loved. Later that afternoon, Jennifer Cole joined me for coffee. She smiled as she reviewed the latest performance reports. Not a bad first year. Not bad at all. She shook her head. I still remember when some people thought we were taking a risk hiring you. I laughed. Apparently I was outdated. Jennifer nearly spilled her coffee. Outdated. Long story. No, she said. I know the story. That surprised me. She continued. The manufacturing community is smaller than people think. She wasn't wrong. People changed companies. Suppliers worked with multiple organizations. Industry events connected competitors. Reputations traveled surprisingly far. Good reputations traveled even farther. A week later, I attended the Midwest Manufacturing Leadership Forum. For almost 20 years I had attended similar conferences, sometimes as a participant, sometimes as a speaker. This year I was giving the keynote presentation. The topic was operational excellence and workforce retention. Nothing revolutionary. Nothing flashy. Just practical lessons learned from decades in manufacturing. After the session ended, people lined up to introduce themselves. Some wanted advice. Some wanted to exchange contact information. Others simply wanted to thank me. One conversation stood out. A young operations manager approached me after most of the crowd had dispersed. She looked nervous. Can I ask you something? Of course. How do you know when it's time to leave a company? The question instantly brought back memories. Ryan's office. The severance package. The boxes. The uncertainty. I thought carefully before answering. You leave when staying requires you to stop being the professional you work so hard to become. She nodded slowly, then thanked me and walked away. I hope the answer helped, because someone had once given me similar advice years earlier. At the time I hadn't fully understood it. Now I did. By autumn, Summit Manufacturing completed the expansion project Jennifer had mentioned during our first lunch meeting. The new facility opened ahead of schedule. Customer demand exceeded projections. Several major contracts were secured. The board approved additional investments for future growth. For the first time in my career, I wasn't just managing operations. I was helping shape the future direction of an entire company. The responsibility was enormous. But so was the opportunity. One Tuesday morning, while reviewing quarterly forecasts, I received a message from Mark. Lunch this week? I smiled. Mark had accepted a position at another manufacturer several months earlier. A better role. Better compensation. Better leadership. We met at a small restaurant near his office. For over an hour we discussed work, industry trends, and mutual friends. Eventually the conversation shifted toward North Valley. I hadn't asked, but I knew it would come up eventually. How bad was it? I said. Mark sighed. Worse than most people know. According to him, the company had lost several major customers. Employee turnover had reached levels nobody had seen before. Multiple departments were struggling to fill critical positions. Several experienced managers had retired early rather than continue dealing with constant instability. The board spent months trying to repair the damage. Some progress had been made, but rebuilding trust proved far more difficult than destroying it. What happened to Ryan? Mark shrugged. Consulting. That answer felt strangely appropriate. And Chloe? No idea. For a moment we sat quietly. Neither of us felt particularly triumphant. Because despite everything, North Valley had once been a good company. Many good people still worked there. Watching an organization damage itself wasn't satisfying. It was sad. Eventually Mark smiled. You know what the funny part is? What? Everyone keeps talking about systems. I laughed. Of course they do. New systems. Better systems. More efficient systems. And, he grinned, they finally realized the old system was you. I shook my head immediately. No. But he continued. Not literally. I understood what he meant. The system wasn't me. The system was the relationships, the communication, the trust, the culture of solving problems together. Those things had existed because hundreds of people contributed to them. The mistake leadership made was assuming those things would continue automatically after the people maintaining them were ignored. They don't. No organization is stronger than the relationships inside it. Several months later, I received unexpected news. The Manufacturing Leadership Association announced its annual awards. Summit Manufacturing had been selected as Company of the Year. Jennifer called me personally. "We got it." I smiled. "We earned it." That evening I drove home later than usual. The sun was beginning to set. Traffic moved slowly. For once I didn't mind. My phone buzzed at a red light. A message from my daughter Emma. "Just got accepted into graduate school. Couldn't have done it without you. Proud of you, Mom." I stared at the screen for several seconds, then smiled. Not because of the award. Not because of the promotion. Not because of the salary. Because moments like that mattered more than any professional achievement. When I arrived home, I sat on the back porch and watched the evening sky darken. The past year had changed almost everything. I had lost a job, lost a routine, lost the future I thought I was building. Yet somehow, by losing those things, I had discovered something better. A stronger career, better leadership, greater opportunities, and a deeper understanding of what professional success actually means. People often assume success comes from being indispensable. They're wrong. Nobody is truly indispensable. Companies survive. Industries evolve. People move on. The real goal is different. The goal is to build something valuable wherever you go. To earn trust. To develop expertise. To help others succeed. Because those things remain with you even when a job disappears. Looking back, Ryan Mitchell didn't end my career. He accidentally forced me to find the version of it I should have been pursuing all along. And if there's one lesson I carried forward from everything that happened, it's this. Technology matters. Strategy matters. Innovation matters. But none of those things matter more than competent people who care about their work and respect the people around them. Every successful company eventually learns that lesson. The lucky ones learn it before they lose their best employees. The unlucky ones learn it afterward. I finished my coffee, looked out into the darkness, and thought about the future. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't worried about it. I was excited, and that made all the difference.